My dear ones, I'm so happy to see you, and I think my father would be very happy. He is happy, and I think he's been welcomed home. And thank you for coming to honor him. And you're going to hear some wonderful music from two renowned artists, Kelly O'Donoghue and Garrick Olson, who's the pianist. And they're very well known, travel around, and they've honored us with giving us some wonderful music that he loved so much. And John Kongsgaard has put the music together. And I want to thank everyone here again, and all of those who've helped us make this happen. And I wanted to introduce Reverend Pater Dalton, who has honored us by leading us in this service. Thank you.
I want to thank Kelly O'Connor there. Thank you very much. Welcome to all of you. June 27, 2024, visiting us one time, one day only. And we are a community assembled around Warren today as we celebrate your life, spirit, presence, and honor and be present supportively to the family. So I'd like to begin with a short reading from what's traditionally called the Old Testament, but myself and my friend Rabbi Steve in Sonoma would agree with me, the Hebrew Bible, from the book of Ecclesiastes, chosen by the family. There is a time for everything, and a season for every activity under the heavens, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance. I'd like to speak, and first of all, I've been invited by the family to say a few words. Did not know Warren personally, but was a contact professionally, and that's how I'm here. I'm grateful. My first name is Pathers, the Gaelic Irish for Peter. Last name is Dalton. And I'm here to begin, and I'd like to begin with Cahill Gibran, our wonderful Lebanese-American spiritual writer of the 19th, 20th century, when he shared extraordinary words on this amazing mystery that we're celebrating here today of your father and grandfather, in his reflections on death. And he says the following: "You would know the secret of death, but how shall you find it unless you seek it in the heart of life? If you would indeed behold the spirit of death, open wide your heart unto the body of life." So family and friends, your presence today, as already stated, June 27, 2024, in this gorgeous, beautiful, historic Mont La Salle Monastery here in Napa Valley, you're here from all walks of life, diverse spiritual paths, and indeed by your presence for the family here today is a testimony, Warren, to your presence and spirit in this community. Because your physical presence is no longer your spiritual presence, emotional presence, loving presence, gregarious presence, whatever the adjectives are still alive and well. And that's why this community of people are here. And while indeed we honor you, Warden, in this gathering, we almost, and I know you'll appreciate this, would almost have to be somewhat asleep at the wheel for us not to be also aware of near and dear people in our own lives. When we come to a gathering of this nature, celebrating the life of Warren, and you lead that community today, our own moms, dads, husbands, wives, children, grandchildren, neighbors, friends, aunts, uncles, people we liked, people we disliked, people that loved us, people that were difficult, they're all here with us because we're all a work in progress. We're all moving towards the mountain as best we can, working through multiple valleys, no doubt, that you yourself, Warren, went through. And so indeed, I'd be amiss to mention October 22nd, 1928 was a big day in the life of Warren, as was June 7th, 2024, and all the engaging hours, minutes, weeks, months, and years in between through multiple experiences. And so then, it is indeed my hunch and strong belief, Warren, that you did indeed honor what Cahill Gibran has said, that you sought the meaning of your own death in the heart of your own life and opened your heart wide unto the body of life all the way through to your first eternal breath just a couple of weeks back, June the 7th, in your beautiful home where at that moment, in your last physical breath and your first eternal breath, you were greeted by your wife, loving wife, Barbara, where you shared that journey together, I believe, since 1958 up to 2.5 years ago. And no doubt did all you could, as all of us who are in committed relationships, all we can do is the best we can, through the agonies and the ecstasies of what it is to be involved in the journey of intimacy and bonding of the heart. And no doubt you gave a decent shot to the words of Paul, which is from Corinthians, which is 1900 years old. And here we are on this June 27, 2024. They're alive and well when Paul wrote in those words, "There is no end to love's forbearance, to its trust, its hope, its power to endure. Love does not end." Physicality, yes. Emotional, spiritual, psychological, belonging, intimacy does not. Because again, that's what we're honoring here today. So Warren, this community is here today to offer support and condolences to your family and to give thanks for your unique set of footprints you have left in the hearts and memories, not alone of the family, but of this community, and no doubt many other people who could not be here physically today. And you have left those footprints as a mentor to many, philanthropist to many, especially to the Napa Valley, environmentalist and lover of nature, an appreciation of art and literature, a lover of music, and as a global superstar in the wine-producing communities, as recognized in the Judgment of Paris in 1976. We will be inspired, family and friends, in a few moments by a number of speakers who will speak to what I'm now referring to lightly in a more detailed way in a few moments, including Warren, your own son, in a few moments. So I will, Warren, if you don't mind, then I will lean in from my set of lenses on the lasting wine that you have made on this earth. And that, of course, is your family, period. All the wine that has been enjoyed throughout the years by people from all walks of life as we are today, all cultures, all races, all spiritual paths, all fellow human beings from all over the world who have tasted your wine, over tables, over conversations, over debates, over maybe through negotiations, through weddings, through births, name all the many times that wine helps us to enter into dialogue at a deeper level. But the wine that I want to emphasize, because the wine of tasting will be well recognized and is all well recognized, and we say hallelujah, but the wine that I'm recognizing here today, of course, is the wine of love flowing through your veins, to the heart of your wife, Barbara, as already mentioned, to your daughters, Kasia, right here in front of me, to your daughter, Julia, to your son, Stephen, and later welcoming into your family, you and your lovely wife, Shanaz, and Jim, and other family members, but especially those. Your hearts had to be, Warren and Barbara, who are now together eternally, your hearts had to be on fire on the births of your grandchildren, Gabriel and Noah, and the triplets that I just realized were triplets a few minutes ago, Mateen, Aaron, Kian, and Maya. And of course, Kat was welcomed into the grandchildren family through marriage, all referring to you as Grandpa and Grandma. Doesn't it remind us of our grandma and grandpas? The hugs, the affection, the support, the getting away with stuff. All the multiple moments that are part of our lives, and indeed, some could be challenging, some may be difficult. That's one of the beautiful things, Warren, today as we celebrate your life, that physical death never robs us of the opportunity of continued dialogue with those who have gone before us. We can put them into our chair, into our consciousness, into our awareness, and have a dialogue. What I'd like to have told you more is, what I forgot to tell you was, what was difficult for me to tell you was, What was difficult about you was. What was very loving about you was. What I appreciate about you was. We can do it. Especially if we're locked in. Warren would want me to say this loud and clear as we celebrate what the deeper spiritual meaning of wine. He'd want me to say that if we're locked into stuff or locked into an experience or experiences a month ago, a year ago, or 50 years ago, this has ebbed away the joy of inner life, then Warren would say today, in my honor and in my spirit, let it go. So that, and then to the grandchildren again today, to Gabriel and Noah and Kat, Mateen, Aaron, Keon, and Maya, chat with him and with grandmother. Especially if you come to moments in your lives that's a crossroads, wondering which way to go, whatever that might be. There are multiple crossroads in our lives, trust me. You already have experienced some of them. In my inner belief, I believe they are with you. They are angels of love around you and whispering in various ways, intuition-wise, and a comment that somebody made or a remark or an awareness that comes to you, and they may be whispering, Grandpa and Grandma, this way, not that way. So they're with you in all situations, and bless you for that. I'm reminded again today as I come to my own final words here that for the family especially, for Kasia, for the three children, I should say, for Kasia, Julia, and Stephen, we have a communal experience, a family experience with our mom and dads, and we have our own unique experience with our mom and dads. So today, I welcome you to, hopefully you already had your own sibling conversation about dad with each other. And then going back to experiences throughout the years that ring out in your hearts and what your own experience was with that. And if, again, and this is for all of us, ladies and gentlemen, family and friends, in honor of Grandpa here today, that it is an opportunity for us also to know that unfinished conversations in our lives with loved ones can be continued. So again, condolences to the entire family here, and to all who are nephews and nieces and all people that are more intimately connected with the family. You have lost a major figure in your lives, and when we lose a person in our lives, it brings up sadness, which is very legitimate, and brings up grief, which is an expression of love, as is sadness. And so I know that I joined the community here today in offering our condolences as a unique community that never in history will come together again. This community, Warren, will never come together again, and we are here to your spirit, your love, your unique footprints on this earth, and so that we leave here today then blessed by your presence. And I know, Warren, that you'd want me to speak to you as an ambassador of God's love. And I know we're here from all faith traditions today, but one faith tradition that we have that's ubiquitous to the human heart, and that is our journey together. The words of the Little Prince, it's only with the heart that we see rightly. What's essential is invisible to the eye. How can we argue with that? Who has emerged? It is the spirit, the eye, the uniqueness of Warden Paul that has emerged. And so today then Warden Paul, in the full presence of, from my paradigm of God's divine, Yahweh's, whatever word we want to use, unconditional love, is saying to all of us and inviting us, Warden Paul is inviting all of us in the midst of our own fragility of life and in the midst of our own living of life. He will be saying the following: a spirit of gratitude. Gratitude. Meister Eckhart. If the only prayer we ever say in a lifetime is thank you, it is sufficient, as long as it comes from the gut. Gratitude. Ward would want us to remain a spirit of gratitude. Mercy, forgiveness. Shakespeare put it right. It's twice blessed. blesses him who gives and blesses him who receives. Forgiveness. Forgiveness of self, other, and others. Warren would also want us, as he did in his life, that we are drinking the wine of inner peace. The wine of inner peace and the wine of joy, but the wine of inner peace that predominantly comes from quiet in our lives. Back to the Hebrew Bible, be still, I am your God. Quiet, solitude, so to become aware of our own unique spirit that will also evolve as Warren's did on June 7. Warren Paul, I love that two names, Warren Paul, as his spirit emerged from his physical body after a long life, June 7th. So will ours on a given day, given date, given time, with whoever it is that will be with us. And we pray for that as well, as Warren was blessed to be with family and caretakers and people who loved him, that that we'll be blessed with the same salute as we take our final breath and our first eternal breath. So we take a moment again to become aware of why we're here. Warren Paul's life, how he touched your life, but particularly his expression of the wine of love as a son, as a brother, father, husband, father-in-law, grandfather, uncle, cousin, friend, fellow worker, mentor, giver, community conscious, and no doubt challenging at times. I don't know, but who isn't as a human being? We all are. All those gifts that you have shared with us. And so I finish then with how I started, where it says again, you would know the secret of death, but how shall you find it unless you seek it in the heart of life? If you would indeed behold the spirit of death. Warren Paul, you are inviting us to the last line of that says, open your heart wide unto the body of life. My hunch, Warren Paul, and your family can testify this far better than I can, and the community here as well, my hunch is you gave it more than a decent shot in your own life. Rest in peace.
forgive my errors. Kelly O'Connor, mezzo-soprano, and Garrick Olson at the piano. I guess I have too many Irish friends. Beautiful. 'Tis a fearful thing to love what death can touch, a fearful thing to love, to hope, to dream, to be, to be. And oh, to lose a thing for fools this, and a holy thing to love. For your life has lived in me. Your laugh once lifted me. Your word was a gift to me. To remember this brings painful joy. 'Tis a human thing, love, what death has touched. Yehuda Halevi.
I want to thank the Winiarski family for this honor and opportunity to say a few words about Warren's contribution and relationship with the University of California, Davis. I first met Warren through Maynard Amerine in the late 1980s, shortly after I had started working there as the wine librarian at UC Davis. From the very beginning, Warren was a challenging presence in my life. Challenging in the most positive way, something that I still treasure. My relationship with Warren deepened about 15 years ago when he accompanied the Smithsonian team on a visit to Davis. Warren was very interested in what the viticulture and enology students were learning about winemaking. When students learn to make wine in the Teaching and Research Winery, they use a fermentation tank that he donated and that has his name on the side. I like to think of it as a nice way for current and future students to be exposed to those great winemakers that have built the California wine industry and who have been instrumental in creating the modern Napa Valley. A while back, Warren invited Davis students to Stag's Leap for a tour of Fay and Stag's Leap vineyards. I was privileged to be included in that tour. It was an eye-opener for me. I saw firsthand Warren's deep understanding of the Stag's Leap vineyards. Warren placed great value on the results of grape and wine research. He particularly valued the work of Albert Winkler and Maynard Amerine. To that end, he established the Warren Winiarski Fund for advancing the Amerine-Winkler Index. Professor of Viticulture and Enology Elizabeth Forstell has taken up this work, and he's using instrumentation and computational abilities that Winkler and Amerine would not have been able to imagine in their wildest dreams. She is deepening our understanding in how grapes grow and how climate affects grapes. Her research was enabled by Warren's vision and generosity, and is a major gift to the future of Napa wine and to the wine industry in general. Warren also took an interest in the library. Perhaps this was in part because of his own scholarly background, perhaps in part because of his respect for the research and teaching of the university. Warren made frequent gifts to the Rare Book Fund of the library. This was important because this type of material is not funded by either the state or by tuition. When the university library acquired the papers of Hugh Johnson, Warren was quick to fund those not inconsiderable costs to make them available to the public. Hugh Johnson's papers were followed by Jancis Robinson and many others. Warren continued to support the processing of additional collections of wine writers. This is because Warren saw a direct link from the person who wrote about wine and the person who made wine. To quote Warren, "They helped advance the conversation and inspired us to render grapes with more subtlety, refinement, and knowledge. That takes a vocabulary. You have to be able to take the senses of taste and smell, the structural elements of wine, and reduce those elements into words. Wine writers did that for us." To enable the university's efforts in collecting and preserving, organizing, and providing access to wine writers' work, Warren endowed the Warren Winiarski Wine Writer Collection. One of Warren's last gifts to the university library was the creation of the Spurrier Winiarski Wine Writer in Residence Award. This award will bring a notable wine writer to UC Davis to work in the library and to work with UC Davis students who are interested in writing about food and wine. In 2022, the University of California, Davis recognized Warren's role in furthering the wine programs, and I mean wine ranging from production to writing, with the Distinguished Friend of the University Award. I want to end with a very short and personal story to show his impact and generosity. In 2019, I took Julianne Ballou, who had been hired by the library as the first Warren Winiarski Wine Writer Collection Fellow, to meet Warren. One of the first questions he asked her was, "What are you interested in?" I think it took her by surprise, as it has with many of us when Warren has asked us what we're interested in. Julianne said she was interested in the literature of place. It was a concept that I had not heard, and I suspect was the same for Warren. Julianne explained that it was writing that reflected how a place impacted the lives of those who lived there, how it shaped things that developed in relation to that place. As I processed that explanation, I could see the wheels in Warren's mind turning, and he smiled that wonderful smile of his. It was a wonderful experience to have shared in his curiosity and ever-expanding knowledge. In Stag's Leap, Warren was the living embodiment of literature of place. I believe that Warren's interest in and concern for truth was a major factor in his deep and wide generosity to the Viticulture and Enology Department and to the University Library at Davis. I think Warren would find it fitting to end with Pliny the Elder. In wine, there's truth.
Over all the hilltops is quiet now. In all the treetops hearest thou hardly a breath. The birds are asleep in the trees. Wait, soon like these thou too shall rest. I loved Warren. I didn't meet him until he was in his 80s. People tell me that maybe that was a good thing. I don't know. But it certainly worked out well for me and my relationship with this huge man. I want to start with, of course, the appropriate thank you to the Winiarski family, especially Julia, Stephen, and Kasia, for allowing me, a small-town kid from Chehalis, Washington, to speak at such an illustrious event. It's quite an honor for me, so thank you very much. I'd also like to thank Diane and Sarah, and I'll explain why later, but they're and his staff who kept Warren engaged with me and with his love of the environment right up to the very end of his life. You see, Warren was many things. Of course, we all know the major awards and that he has received over the years, all, of course, well-deserved. But what I would guess the majority of you don't know is that his legacy is equally, if not even stronger, about his love of nature, the love of the Napa Valley in particular, as he called it, our national treasure, and his dedication to making sure that while he was here and beyond his years, that there would be people that would continue to take care of this national treasure. I met Warren at a Save Rural Angwin meeting at Donna Morgan's house, who happens to be here today. And I walked into the room, and there was Warren and Volker Eisler and another man lesser known, but just as equally important, Dwayne Cronk. We were fighting a 1,000-house development on the top of Howell Mountain. And Warren, who got his start, of course, in the love of nature and protection of Napa Valley, he started with the Ag Preserve. He was a big driver of that. We should have all recognized that and should still recognize that to this day. In Angwin, it was fairly untouched, a couple thousand feet above the valley floor, and he loved the open space, and he loved the vineyards that were there at that time. He saw it as no place for a big housing development. I just want to say another thing that is, I think, very fitting about the character of Warren and his humanism, because I don't think many people know that he went door to door canvassing. He covered all of Angwin himself. And because of that, when the vote came down, Angwin had the highest percentage of positive votes about establishing the Ag Preserve, and later on not allowing a housing development up there. One of the few wins in that department we've had over the years. In 2016, Jim Wilson, who is also here, and I started an initiative called the Water, Forest, and Oak Woodland Protection Initiative. You know who jumped on board of that? Warren, and even more so, his beautiful daughter, Julia. They were just unstoppable in helping to get that initiative. Unfortunately, at the county level, the county council at the time found a perceived legal flaw. We took that all the way to the California Supreme Court, where a split decision was the outcome, meaning that's still an open case. But what did that do to Warren? It just gave him more incentive, and Julia as well, more incentive to protect our watersheds. So we went back to the attorneys. We drew up another initiative. We formed the Growers and Vintners for Responsible Agriculture, which later became the Save Napa Valley Foundation, of which Warren was a contributor, a supporter, and a member. I would like to read you something that Warren said, which encompasses everything he felt about that measure in 2018. I'm Warren Winiarski, and I've been in the wine industry since 1964. Water is needed in the valley, and it gets its recharge to the valley floor from the oak woodlands. The citizens are dealing with a limited resource, and agriculture is part of that equation, not the whole story. I urge my fellow citizens to vote for Measure C. That was a very brave and courageous thing for a man who's ensconced in the wine industry to actually go up against the industry, who was clearly against it, since they raised $1 million to defeat it by 1%. I'm not going to go political here, I promise. It's hard not to. That was very disturbing, that Warren put so much of his own effort and support money and lost by 1%. Most of us would have given up. Not Warren. That was not him at all. Out of that became Mike Thompson called together a large groups of people from the environmental cause, from the wine industry, the electeds, and he put together an ad hoc committee where we discussed what could go next. Out of that came the county's water quality tree protection ordinance. But during the write-up of that and ongoing political nature of that, you know what Warren did? He bought all the supervisors a copy of Profiles in Courage. It didn't help then, but it certainly has helped now. It takes a while to change things, but the things have now changed, and you'll see, especially next year. Warren came to me. I was a little awestruck. He says, "I won't support a loser again." leading to another in 2020 incident in which I made the mistake and I still didn't understand his reaction to this incident until I heard John Williams speak at the Wine Library event. I think I have John's permission to bring that up. Warren thought, well, we needed a couple of things to win in 2020. We needed a poll, a direct, expensive poll to determine what do the citizens of Napa most worry about? What are they concerned about? The poll came out with, what would you think? Water. Water sustainability, water availability, quality and quantity of water. At a meeting of the Save Napa Valley Foundation, I made the mistake of giving him credit for paying for that poll. Afterwards, he gave me a look that, have any of you seen it? It was one that just humbled me, I'll tell you. The point was that he did a lot and didn't want to get credit all the time for it, and I had violated his confidence. And I went home and I thought for quite a while, what do I do about this? He was very upset with me, and rightly so. And I thought, well, there's a man, if I think I know him well, he doesn't want any excuses. So about a week or two later, I simply apologized and said I had no excuse, that I made a mistake, and I was sincerely sorry. From that point on, Warren and I established a friendship unlike any other in this room. Now, I'm not saying it's better than anybody. He wasn't my father. But I really gained a tremendous relationship of respect and love for Warren from that point forward. It reminds me of the John Williams story where when you came to work for him in Napa, you'd think, oh, I'd start in the barrel room or I'd start by cleaning barrels. But no, he wanted to know he could trust you first. So he usually had these guys like John Williams, for example, drive his kids to school and back to see if they could do that satisfactorily and on time. So I'm sorry for stealing your thunder there, John, but that's a great story, and it's very, very fitting of how he needed to kind of straighten me out as well and give me a little probationary period. I think that's what it is more than. Leading up to this, in 2020, we were going to do another initiative after we'd gotten this poll, but we all know COVID hit. We had the initiative drawn up to protect the woodlands and the watershed and the water resources, but we could not go forward because we couldn't even collect signatures. Everybody was locked down. So that was the end of initiative process. That was the end of that. However, of course, Warren didn't give up at all. As the aging process continued, he stopped coming to Save Napa Valley Foundation meetings, and this is where the thanks to Diane and Sarah and Denise, who kept Warren informed about what was going on through copying emails that I'd sent from talking to him. And it was a rare privilege. That's when I feel like Warren and I really got close, is because he was listening to me, this small town kid from Washington State. But he knew that I had the same love of nature and the protection of this place that he did. He supported our shared environmental cause right up to the end of his life's journey, and his concern led him to support the new change in leadership that's happening in Napa County. He supported Ann Cottrell, Joelle Gallagher, Liz Alessio, and Amber Manfrey. Those are 4 out of the 5 all-women supervisors we're going to have starting January 1, 2025. He was so happy about that. And I can't help but there's a smile in the front row because isn't it great that they're all women? I mean, they were the best candidates, not just that they were women. I will close with a very personal thing that I think I have authorization to talk about. In Warren's last couple of days, he became quite weak and ill, a little confusion, but more than anything, he was in a lot of pain. Just like Warren could control a lot of things, it's almost like he was able to control his own passing. His last words were, "I'm done." He's done, but we're not done. His need and passion to protect the open space, to preserve this fantastic national treasure, is not going away with his passing, because all of us should care equally, and we will continue his fight. Thank you so much.
Hello. It's an honor to be here with all of you and to speak about Warren and the Smithsonian Institution's National Museum of American History in Washington, D.C. I want to thank Stephen and Kasia and Julia for inviting me to speak this morning. This relationship is truly one for the ages, having blossomed after a phone call Warren made to the Smithsonian 30 years ago this December. By now, this is an oft-told tale, but I mention the call here because it contains the seeds of how we came to learn about and appreciate and embrace this extraordinary individual, Warren Winiarski. His simple question, what is the Smithsonian doing to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the Paris tasting? Well, that question set in motion a conversation that extended and expanded over decades and continues to resonate in the collections, the exhibitions, and the programs of the museum. Warren's famous intensity was apparent from the beginning. He fervently believed that the story of the Judgment of Paris was not only worthy of preservation, but of ongoing examination, dissemination, and celebration. He intuited that the world's largest museum and education complex was the right place to curate it and celebrate it and share it. His boundless devotion to rigorous research and careful scholarship was increasingly matched by our own Smithsonian colleagues, and we found that beyond the beverage in the bottle and the famous tasting lay fertile fields that connected beautifully to the larger strands of history and culture that form the core of the museum's work in public history. As we researched and collected around the themes of wine and tradition and innovation, migrations of people and ideas, the American context of wine and business, of landscape, place, region, climate, and change, Warren consistently asked us the best questions that helped eke out a little more perfection in our work, to echo one of our favorite Winiarski phrases. If our relationship over many years was one for the ages, it was also one for the archives. It was our distinct privilege to have had an open door at Stag's Leap Wine Cellars over many years. Warren allowed us to collect documents and photographs from the company files, and to this day, some of my favorites show Warren and Barbara and young Kasia and Stephen and Julia in the vineyards, helping and learning, and sometimes sampling fruit, it seems. We documented on film and in oral histories the voices, the knowledge, and phenomenal skills of staff working in every single part of the organization. Those materials are now safely stored and available for researchers at the National Museum of American History. You know, in my mind, I can actually hear our recording of Warren talking about the land that became Stag's Leap Wine Cellars and that shaped a life well lived. He said, "The destiny of the soil was not prunes, it was Cabernet. And this soil was not meant for Chardonnay, and we like Cabernet better." A film sequence shows Warren explaining vineyard management with his arms in the air and his feet at a jaunty angle. A segment of film that we have called Dances with Wine. Warren and Barbara also supported our work in other parts of California and the nation as well. If we're talking about the legacy of the Judgment of Paris, the reach extends well beyond the Napa Valley, and those materials from around the country are also preserved in the museum's archives. The Winiarskis also sponsored some of our public programs, from winemakers' dinners to conversations and demonstrations that consistently drew crowds to the museum to learn, to ask questions, to meet the superstars of American wine, and to experience phenomenal bottled poetry, of course. Warren was always interested in the angles we were taking in our research, what we were reading, which archives and people we were visiting. This was not monitoring, but he just couldn't help it. He was showing his really keen intellectual interest in understanding how the project and the archives were being shaped and expanded. We soon recognized that Warren's interest was not just in the past, but in the present and future as well. He kept abreast of what was happening locally and around the globe in the quest to achieve best practice and highest standards in viticulture and winemaking. Many people I interviewed told me about Warren's continued quest for knowledge and how his curiosity never dimmed, and we observed that as well. As I mentioned, Warren had an intensity about him, and we appreciated the laser focus he brought to conversations and planning. One special event was the recorking of the Paris tasting bottles in 2005, an incredible process that fascinated everyone present. His utter faith in the gentlemen doing the honors and the special equipment that they had brought to do the job was absolutely solid. There was never a doubt that changing the corks in these national treasures in front of a bunch of people could be anything but successful. Because we had planned for every step of this seminar, it did go without a hitch, resulting in an event that to this day people in DC still talk about. We were always happy to welcome Warren and Barbara and the Winiarski family to the Smithsonian, and we tried to make those visits memorable. They were delighted, of course, to see the Paris tasting wines on view in a temporary exhibition on Smithsonian treasures. The wines were displayed right next to one of the museum's incomparable Stradivarius violins. Another time, we strolled through the Freer Gallery of Asian Art and admired silver wine horns from the 4th century. And don't you know, Warren had questions that I couldn't answer, but he went on his own way to do research. And I'll never forget how we spent time with a textile conservator who was working on the preservation of the actual 1814 Star-Spangled Banner, the flag that inspired our national anthem. Warren's appreciation for the scientific and technical aspects of analyzing the strength of these English wool fibers from 1814 inspired him and Barbara to support an endowment for the continued preservation of this iconic flag in our care. When Warren was amused by something, his expression would change to a half smile, and lo, there would be a twinkle in his eye. On one memorable occasion in D.C., we offered to pick him up at his hotel and drive to a restaurant for dinner. We pulled up in front of the Willard Hotel, a very fancy place about a block from the White House. And we pulled up in my fellow curator, Raina Green's burgundy red, 1970 Cadillac Eldorado hardtop convertible. And I just can't tell you, Warren's half smile emerged. And while the ride lasted just a few blocks, that big Eldorado was full of a sense of mischief and joy and laughter that we've never forgotten. Finally, we are grateful that the family's legacy will live on through our endowed curatorial position that will proudly bear Warren and Barbara's name. We at the Smithsonian, including our director, Dr. Anthea Hartig, who is also here today, and also members of our food and wine team back in Washington, we all mourn his passing and extend our sincere condolences to his beautiful family and legions of friends. But we also celebrate his generous and extraordinary life with deep respect, gratitude, and yes, joy, that we had so many years of creatively sharing a commitment to the history of wine and winemaking in America and its preservation for everyone in perpetuity at the National Museum of American History. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning, Kasia, Stephen, Julia, and friends of Warren. It's nice to be here with all of you. Unfortunately, for this morning, Piero Antinori, who I work for here in Napa Valley, is not able to be with us. But on behalf of Piero and the Antinori family, Piero asked if I would convey a few words on the friendship he had with Warren. Warren and Piero's friendship goes back many, many years. They would often see each other on their visits to New York City, or it could be London, or it could be right here in Napa Valley, which became more frequent when the Antinori family made their first investment in Napa Valley in 1986, which was not far from Stag's Leap Wine Cellars. Piero and Warren would get together to share ideas. They had a wonderful respect for each other and the wines that they each produced. When Warren and his family decided to sell Stag's Leap Wine Cellars in 2007, Warren turned to Piero. At that time, the Antinori family was able to acquire a small interest in the ownership of Stag's Leap Wine Cellars. Yet 16 years later, just last year, and about this time last year, the family was able to purchase the entire wine estate. For Piero Antinori, it fulfilled a promise he made to his good friend, Warren, in 2007, that the Antinori family would preserve the legacy of Stag's Leap Wine Cellars. We were given a second chance to fulfill that promise, a decision that the Antinori family assumed with a deep sense of responsibility. And I sensed it also brought a twinkle, like was just mentioned, in Warren's eye when Piero shared the news. I would like to share with you a few words that Piero shared with us about Warren. He goes, "Warren Winiarski is undoubtedly one of the people I feel I've always known. Since the first time I visited Napa Valley many, many years ago, it was about 1966, I have always been lucky enough to meet him, and every time I was impressed and fascinated by his deep competence and above all by his passion for viticulture and winemaking. Warren will be remembered as one of the protagonists of success of Napa Valley wines, and certainly for me, one of the inspirations who most influenced my professional history. Last but not least, a person with a huge humanistic culture and also a great sense of humor. He goes, a true friend. I have read many times what Piero had to say about Warren, and there are a few words that he used, which I am certain are words that many of you would also use to describe Warren. Words like competent, passionate, inspirational, sense of humor, friend, humanistic culture. Yet one word that really stood out for me was Piero's use of the word when describing Warren as protagonist, or the ability to advocate or champion of a particular cause or idea. For Warren, a cause heavy on his heart was the preservation, which we just talked about, and the success of Napa Valley wine growing. So what are the traits of a protagonist that relate to Warren? Some of these things you all already know. But a protagonist is driven by a goal or curiosity. For Warren, he was one of the great thinkers of our Napa Valley wine industry, and he never lost his wine-growing curiosity. And also, a protagonist has a relatable character flaw. For Warren, it was achieving the sense of completeness in a wine. Warren would also always say, to describe a wine, it must have a beginning, a middle, and an end. A protagonist is loyal to family and friends, and there's no better example of that than all of us that are here today. A protagonist accepts change. My background is in viticulture, and I had the opportunity several times to be with Warren and Danny Schuster, a bright viticulturist, walking the vine rows of Fay and SLV, and always looking for ways of change that would grow better grapes. A protagonist is brave and courageous. An example is when Warren packed up his family, he was right here in front of us, in 1964, leaving Chicago and bringing them to Napa Valley to begin a winemaker's life. And finally, a protagonist has superior intelligence and strength. Warren was a dreamer. We've heard about that already this morning, with a great vision directed towards continuous improvements in both the vineyard and the cellar. This is the Warren Winiarski that I knew and respected, a protagonist of the success of Napa Valley wines. In closing, Kasia, Stephen, Julia, and your beautiful families, as I mentioned earlier, Piero made a promise to your father, his friend, your father, and grandfather, to preserve the legacy of what your family has created here in Napa Valley with Stag's Leap Wine Cellars. I am confident that the Antinori family will be great stewards of the land, loyal caretakers of the wine, and respectful to the traditions that the founder, Warren Winiarski, created. So please, come by to Stag's Leap Wine Cellars, visit with us, and let us know how we are doing. Thank you very much.
I'd like to thank Julia, Kasia, and Stephen for allowing me to say a few words today. A week or so after I started at Stag's Leap Wine Cellars, I went to see Warren and I asked him, how do I get a cell phone? And he looked at me and he said, why in the world would you want a cell phone? I said, well, when I'm driving to the vineyard, I like to do some things, get some work done. And he said, when you're driving to the vineyard, I don't want you on the phone. I want you daydreaming about how you're going to make better wine. A few years after that, Warren walked into my office when I was at my computer and he asked me, why are you always at that computer? And I said, well, I've got a lot of work to do. And he said, I think you should give it to someone else and have them do that work for you. So he came by a few days later and he asked me, where's your computer? I said, I gave it to somebody much smarter than I am. While Warren was religious, I connected more with his spirituality. In the past, deer found their way onto the property, and we would get a posse together of vineyard workers and cellar workers and chase it off the property. We would, recently Stephen showed me a photograph of a stag that was standing outside Warren's bedroom, and Julia had spotted it as well, and I believe took a photograph of it. I think it was a very appropriate omen. Warren defined his code of ethics and moral values. He abided by them, and in my presence, he did not impose them on others. He had a strong sense of place in history and in his land. When you met with him on a project or issue, it was important to be prepared, precise, and pithy. Having a sense of humor occasionally helped. The team had tried for years to upgrade the Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignon package to a punt bottle and tin foil. In a final proposal to make the changes in packaging, we referred to a discussion Warren had had with Karen McNeil, in which he told her that Aristotle had made an association between height and beauty. With this in mind, we concluded in our proposal that this bottle would stand much more handsomely among the other wines on the shelf if it were a little taller. He burst out laughing, reached for a pen, and approved the changes. As you look across the hands of time, you begin to understand the profound impact Warren had on many of the viticulturists and winemakers he inspired and mentored. While he had many accomplishments in his life that will stand the test of time and may self-perpetuate, he built hospital wings, made institution-changing donations, supported impressive research projects and environmental causes. The list goes on and on. Those contributions aside, perhaps the biggest one he made in his life was in the people he took under his wing. It is those lucky individuals who will carry his efforts and mentor future generations. We all felt like we were his right-hand person. When we designed the caves as a map of the Napa Valley, we wanted to place a geological marker at the location of Stag's Leap Wine Cellars in the caves. However, Warren wanted to install a Foucault pendulum so that the wine resting in the caves and the people working there would have a sense of time passing. Steve and Julie and I were against the idea of the pendulum. Warren took me to the domed room, which we affectionately called the balcony. Actually, that was a term Ned Forrest, the architect, came up with, but it was affectionate, and showed me a Foucault pendulum made in papier-mâché, hanging from the cupola. After that visit, I went to see Stephen and Julia to describe my impression of the pendulum, the feeling it made me, that it gave me. They hunkered down in their opposition to it. So I said, the last one to the balcony is a nincompoop, and started running. We raced through the mud in the caves, and we were out of breath when we arrived at the balcony. I stepped up to the pendulum in papier-mâché and gave it a push. The three of us stood in silence as we watched it gently go back and forth. That was all it took to see something special through Warren's eyes. Warren traveled to Europe before harvest each year. He traveled in coach. When he came back my first year, I told him, we're going to pick SOV 4 Center tomorrow. Would you like to walk the block with me? We walked slowly up the slope, zigzagging between the two rows, and at the top of the block, Paula, he stopped and cupped a cluster. I understand why you want to pick this, and you can, but I think that you can eke out a little more perfection if you waited a few days. I waited. When I last saw Warren, excuse me, in May, he was sitting to his left, and he was fiddling with his right hearing aid, because it wasn't working, flicking it, changing the battery, etc. And I said to him, Warren, I would prefer you not have that right hearing aid work. He said, why in the world would you say that? I said, because I don't want what I say to you to go in one ear and out the other. He smiled. Of course, someone came to repair it. But he had heard me speak at a meeting, and the title of the talk was Judgment of Napa. And basically, it was a playoff of, obviously, Judgment of Paris. But the idea was, how do we answer the question when our grandchildren and great-grandchildren ask us, what did you do to preserve Napa Valley? And I had described this idea in this talk about creating a coalition to preserve and protect and restore the ecosystem and water of Napa Valley. So when I saw Warren, he asked me, so what are you doing about this? What have you done so far? Fortunately, we had done something. Otherwise, it would have been a very long meeting. But I realized there, and I think you all know this, that nothing ever went in one ear and out the other with Warren. Thank you.
I knew and admired Warren, but today I speak as former dean and incoming president of St. John's College Santa Fe, especially on behalf of our college, the St. John's College community in Annapolis and Santa Fe, and many members of that community who knew him still better. I'm very grateful to Julia, Kasia, and Stephen for the opportunity to do so. We at St. John's offer our sympathy to Warren's family. We join in celebrating his life, and we give thanks for the for the generosity he and Barbara extended toward their alma mater, which also involves sharing that education, formally and informally, with their children. Many of us are saddened that we can't continue the conversation with Warren about books and education and wine. But as Stephen and I had a chance to discuss yesterday, somehow that conversation, his voice as I hear it, quiet and measured, eloquent and insistent, does remain with us, and we are grateful for that. At St. John's, we celebrate his legacy in winemaking and in the Napa Valley community, but we know Warren as a quintessential graduate of our college, a quintessential Johnny, who blended in a marvelous way the life of the mind engaged in reading, writing, teaching, and conversation, his first sailing, with a different life of the mind and of the senses and the hands and the land engaged in agriculture, viniculture, and winemaking, his long second sailing, as though nothing were more natural or more human than that sort of versatility. Among a large number of Johnny winemakers, including those present or watching today, and including many he mentored, Warren was a singular exemplar of this Odyssean versatility. And that was so on display in the Remembrance Room in very powerful and beautiful ways. A 2014 article in the Washington Post posed the question why so many St. John's graduates are accomplished winemakers. Warren was quoted at length, and I love what he had to say there. Here is just some of it, quoting Warren. I think it has something to do with what I call a disaffiliation with the modern world. Grape growing is one of the oldest activities in the world, dating back to Noah. It represents a reintroduction to the divine, longevity, and a connection between man and the divine. I think the mild disaffiliation from modernity that may come from a St. John's philosophically based education, the exercise of reason, the exercise of questioning, and rational effort, implies a new dedication and a new kind of effort, which is related to the soil and to the earth fundamentally. What an answer. Many of our graduates would hear in that answer, which must have surprised the interviewer, a true Johnny, reflective and deep, searching and surprising, and yes, happily, a little eccentric and enigmatic. He used the word dedication. Warren was so dedicated to our college and gave back in so many ways. Just to state some of it, he served on our governing board for over 2 decades. He co-led great book seminars on Shakespeare, Aristotle, Machiavelli, and other beloved authors each summer in Santa Fe for over 2 decades, week-long seminars. In 2012, we opened the Winiarski Student Center, the last major addition to our campus in Santa Fe, supported by a gift from Warren and Barbara. They were already among the most generous philanthropic supporters of our college on both of our campuses by that time. But in 2018, they made, through the Winiarski Family Foundation, the largest gift to date in the history of our college. That historic gift helped secure the college for the next generation. With each gift, Warren worked insistently and exactingly, and we've heard some about this, to ensure it was going to support the college and the educational program that he loved and was grateful for. I came here directly from a board meeting in Santa Fe. Warren's generosity to the college was the constant theme. As we honored his memory there and shared stories, I heard from our college leaders and others who had worked with Warren closely over many years in many settings. Common themes were his gratitude and dedication to the college, his restless inquisitiveness and pursuit of excellence, his persistence and precision, and an unwillingness, uncompromising unwillingness to settle for superficial or rhetorical answers. As dean, I spoke to him several times over a few years. Each conversation lasted a couple hours, at least, and not much more than that at most. Each time he was pressing to ensure the college had remained and would remain faithful to its better angels. Those were challenging conversations, but they were inspiring, driven by Warren's seriousness and depth of care. I was present when he spoke at the dedication of the Winiarski Student Center in 2012, and some of the family was present there for that. The buildings in the center are named after characters in Shakespeare's Tempest, by the way. It was one of the most moving occasions of my 20 years on the faculty. In a quiet but riveting voice, he said, and I'm quoting as I remember it, "You are thanking me and Barbara for this gift, the gift of a home, a place to live and to study. And I do hope it is a wonderful gift. But nothing we have given is as great as the gift we received from our education at St. John's. Everything we have gone on to do has depended on it." What he said and how he said it captured as well as I've ever heard the gratitude we can feel as alumni and the reason we choose to give back and sometimes give of ourselves in such seemingly outsized ways. I want to close with some comments our retiring Santa Fe president, Mark Roosevelt, made last week. Quoting Mark and joining in his emphasis, "No one was more committed to St. John's and our academic program. No one. He loved it, and he believed in its transformational power." Mark added, and I know this applies to other places in Warren's life, as it does to St. John's, Our colleague Eva Brand has said that we should all seek to find some place we love and make it better. Find some place we love and make it better. Warren was the embodiment of that advice, and we all owe him a tremendous debt of gratitude.
Kasia, Julia, Stephen, thanks for giving me this opportunity to say a few words about your mom and dad. You know, he was kind of a piece of work, wasn't he? Do the kids know? Yeah. If so, nothing here I'll say will shock anyone too much. 3 weeks and 50 years ago, I started my first job in the Napa Valley at Stag's Leap Wine Cellars. A couple of weeks before starting, I had been introduced to Warren and Barbara by Larry Turley at the Napa Valley Wine Library tasting at Charles Krug Winery, and I asked if they needed any help. And a couple days later, Warren called, and after a job interview that somehow involved trying to fix an old tractor, I was hired. Stag's Leap Wine Cellars 50 years ago was not anything like the beautiful winery that stands there today. A little stucco cellar filled with barrels, a couple of large wooden tanks, a few casks of dubious origin. On the back deck, there were a few tanks, actually those were new. A used Wilma's press, and 2 of the crankiest centrifugal pumps I've ever met. The 73 was soon to be bottled, the 74 was in the barrels, and the 75 Cabernet Sauvignon was still on the vine. Warren, I came to appreciate, had one of the finest palates I've ever met. He had a way of looking into wine that was exceptional. Many people have the ability to craft a fine bottle of wine, but few have the vision, incredible drive, and philosophical integrity to make a wine that approaches art. Warren was an artist. That said, Warren had a bad habit of pumping out a tank without venting the top. And when I arrived at the cellar, he was considerably vexed that 2 of his new tanks had their tops caved in. Now, I won't tell you why I had some experience with this problem, but I did know the trick of repair. And when after a couple of days' work, I was able to pop them back out, he was considerably relieved. So relieved that, in fact, he promoted me to head cellarman, with no sense of irony that I was the only person working there at the time. This change did not come with any change in compensation, but it did come with a new and serious job duty, as Mike aforementioned. I was now entrusted to pick up Kasia and Julia and Stephen at the bus stop after school each day. This, after all, was a family winery. I can't imagine the pressure and stress Warren and Barbara must have been under. They had invested everything in this new venture. They were making wine from a new and untested area based on Warren's chance encounter with a local grape grower, Nate Fay, and he took that chance. They had a growing family. There was no assurance that even if they made great wine, that there would be a market for it. Put yourself back in this time. There was no Stag's Leap appellation. Hell, there was hardly a Napa Valley appellation at that point. Napa was a sleepy backwater. The only place you could eat in Yountville was the Chutney Kitchen. Mel's Clothing was what passed for a boutique in St. Helena. And yet here was this family planting a prune orchard and trying to make a wine that he believed in so completely. The 74 cab was having trouble finishing its malolactic fermentation, and Warren had asked Andrei Chelyshev to come over to consult. Now, mind you, I had a couple years of basic experience in a winery back east, but I was, in truth, just about as green as peas on this job. But I knew who Andrei was, and this was big. I was intimidated, to say the least, and my job was to fetch the samples from the various casks and barrels for the two of them to try. And when I came back with the first 2 glasses, Warren looked at me and said, "Where's yours?" I was to taste alongside Warren and the great Andrei. Warren was inclusive that way. "You must taste the wine," he would say. Well, some lab work needed to be done on those wines, and after that day, Warren asked me if I could do the analysis. In one corner of the cellar was a little tax-paid room and a little bathroom and a sink outside and a little table next to the sink. And on that table there was an ancient abulometer, a burette, a few flasks, a couple of pipettes, and some sodium hydroxide that I don't think had been standardized in 2 years. And here I had to do this analysis. Fortunately, I had a friend in St. Helena, Lisa Vanderwater, who was opening a new wine lab, and unbeknownst to Warren, after work I took the samples up, and for a couple bottles shared, Lisa let me use her lab. I know Warren was suspicious the next day when I presented the results, but I only found out later that he was so suspicious that he took samples himself up to Lisa's new lab to confirm the results. Lisa stayed mum and got paid after all. Satisfied with the results, Warren gave me my next promotion to that of enologist. This promotion came with no change in compensation, but yet another new responsibility. I was to be in charge of laying a new stone terrace up at the Winiarski's house. I was able to work at Stag's Leap part-time for the next couple of years, but I was taking classes at UC Davis and doing my research at Robert Mondavi, so Warren needed more help. And this became a series of mentorship hires that we now know include some of the most significant names in California wine history, many who got their start or perfected their craft at Stag's Leap. Many who are here today. These are the hands that Warren and Barbara celebrated so generously back in 2013. Time moved along, but I have one last story. I believe I was the only one at the winery on a warm June day in 1976 when Warren came racing down the hill with a copy of Time magazine in his hand. Warren had known about the Superior tasting for some time, but I believe that when the Tabor article, The Judgment of Paris, came out in Time magazine, he sensed for the first time the commercial implications of the Paris tasting. So he had brought with him a cash box, an invoice pad, and 2 pens. And as we rolled the barrel over to the front door of the cellar, stood at its end, displayed a couple bottles, and put up a price list, I got my third and final promotion at Stag's Leap. In addition to my other duties, I was now in charge of sales to anyone who visited the winery. It came with no additional compensation. I think I can speak for all of us here who had the opportunity to work with Warren. He was not always easy. Boy, there's the understatement of the day. And I'm sure if it hadn't been for Barbara, that more than a few of us would have walked. But Warren could be warm as well. He had a great sense of humor, expressed often in just that wry smile that we all know so well. If not generous in compensation, he was always generous in sharing his knowledge and passion. He taught us all so much in ways we did not perhaps even fully appreciate at the time. Warren and Barbara and the Winiarski family name will be written large in Napa Valley wine history, in California history, in our country's history. Their tireless work on the Ag Preserve Appalachian Protection, the promotion of Stag's Leap Appalachian land use, UC Davis, Smithsonian, St. John's. These and countless other efforts and financial support and acts of generosity are worth a legacy of their own. But let us not forget the great bottles of wine that were crafted by this family that continue to inspire the world now 5 decades later. Truly, the most appreciated bottle in my cellar is a bottle of 75 Gamay Beaujolais, the last one I have from working there. This is truly a legacy not to be denied, and ample evidence of 2 lives well lived. My life was forever changed by my brief time with this remarkable family, and I know so many others feel the same way. Thank you, Warren and Barbara. Rest in peace. You will never be forgotten.
Hello to all of you, and welcome. It's with great gratitude that I see so many friends, family, and those that had a connection with our family. And I'm sure I speak for my sisters as well, for that gratitude and feeling humbled to see and hear from so many of you, and all the achievements that my parents did in this valley have been spoken of. But I'd like to speak a little bit about trees. And in the end, towards the end, as I was sitting with my father, I had come back from a walk, and I had seen so many of the trees that he had cared for over the years on the property, the majestic oaks that dot that hill. And I remarked to him my gratitude and my recognition of the care that he had taken of those trees, propping up a precarious trunk, careful pruning of excessive foliage to reduce the windage in the tree for the winter storms, or placing a large boulder under a branch, a beautiful branch that was about to break off. And I remarked that to him, and he looked at me and he smiled and he said, "They're my friends." And I think about that, and I think about all his friends and all of those of you who he touched with his life, and who he gave a kind word or a clasped hand or words of encouragement or some way to prop you up and support you and give you love. And so the other story I want to tell about trees, many of you know this, but maybe not all of you. There's 2 trees at the winery, Coast Live Oak and a Valley Oak, that grew up next to each other, and they were some of the first trees that he protected. 2 different trees. I don't know what their roots are doing, but I know that their branches grew together in ways that you cannot tell where one tree ends and the other one starts. And we call those trees the lovers. And those 2 trees stretched their canopy to the sky, beautiful branches, foliage, and I'm sure their roots have grown together over these years. And I think of those 2 trees, and I think of my parents and how their spirit lives on in those trees. And so I want you all to think about that and think about the care that he took for those trees. and that my parents took for so many people and gave to so many people. And share that and spread that. You mighty oaks, Sir Warren, Lady Barbara, rest in peace.
I think the word that's coming to me is wow. Thank you all for the sharing, beautiful. Warren Paul is probably also saying to all of us, it's time for a glass of wine. And when we have that glass of wine, we think about all the people that are involved in that glass of wine. Think of the amount of people as we taste that wine, chatting, visiting, enjoying, all the folks that have been involved in that glass of wine that's come into our mouth. So let's stand and we'll do a blessing, please. And afterwards there'll be a beautiful piece of music from Bach. So I turn again very briefly to the Hebrew Bible from the 23rd Psalm. Warren Paul, you bless us with these words. That does not say the Lord might be, may be, I'll think about it. It says the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. And from the New Testament, come to me all you who labor and are burdened, and I will refresh you. Thank you, Warren Paul, for reminding me to share those words today with this beautiful community of people. Family have asked me to share a lovely blessing here, Warren Paul, that apparently in the last couple of days before you took your first eternal breath, you brought mention to it again. You were very fond of it. And I will add a few verses from a piece of Irish blessing. I do that with great liberty, seeing that your family and my family came from the same continent. And so we share that. So from this beautiful poem in honor of you, Warren Paul, and as a blessing to your 3 children, grandchildren, extended families, that's entitled Master of Heaven and Earth, All Things Bright and Beautiful, by Cecil Francis Alexander. All things bright and beautiful, all creatures great and small, all things wise and wonderful, the Lord God made them all. Each little flower that opens, each little bird that sings, He made their glowing colors, He made their tiny wings. The rich man in his castle, the poor man at his gate, God made them high, low, and ordered their estate. The purple-headed mountain, the river running by, the sunset and the morning that brightens up the sky. The cold wind in the winter, the pleasant summer in the sun, the ripe fruits in the garden, He made them all, every one. The tall trees in the greenwood, the meadows where we play, the rushes by the water we gather every day. He gave us eyes to see them, lips that we might tell how great is God Almighty, who has made all things well. And so to all of you, in honor of this sacred day, we have a gathering afterwards. Welcome to continue to chat and visit and honor Warren Paul's life and spirit and presence. May the road rise up to meet you. May the wind be always on your back. May the rains fall softly upon your fields, on the ground beneath. May the sun shine warmly upon your face until we meet again. May God bless especially the family and this unique community and hold all of us in the hollow of their hands. Warren Paul, rest in peace. Thank you all for being here. Please, let's honor Bach, piece of music for a minute or so, and then we'll exit. The family will be going first, I believe, and then we'll follow for a continued celebration. Please be seated just for a minute or so. Thank you.